Mixing with Mike plugin of the week. I'm back from brainworx, the BX Glue plugin. This is an emulation of a VCA compressor, most closely associated, obviously, with the SSL bus compressor, G or E. I'm not exactly sure. They say 80s. G series console came out sort of 86, 87. I don't know, very similar. Either way, what we have is a compressor. They've added in some, which emulates the VCA compressor, and there's some little tricks and gadgets that kind of go along with it. Let's kind of do a quick overview to begin with, and then we'll kind of dive in, have all the normal AB, copy, paste, all of that sort of stuff, presets. Ambience. Okay, there's a way to just kind of hear just what the compression is doing, basic thing there. There are 3 layers to this. You get the basic controls here. This opens up all 3 layers, which includes sidechain emphasis, filter, and then their stereo width plugin area, which they apply or add to all of their brainworx plugins. Tone section, okay, which gives you some saturation for transformers. All of that, you select them here, mix wet dry control, input output levels, and the primary controls are all up here. So what's different about this when you actually look at it from an SSL bus compressor? Let's talk about what's the same. Ratios 2-to-1, 4-to-1, 10-to-1, right? So you have those. That's basically right on. Threshold is threshold. Attack settings from 0.1, 0.3, 1 millisecond, 3 milliseconds, 10 milliseconds, 30 milliseconds. So that's sort of stock. Release controls, right? Here you get a full range of release control, and it does have the auto release, which will give you an initial quick recovery, but a little more sustain on the back end, depending upon what program material you're feeding in. So all of that kind of works pretty straightforward. Now, there's a couple things that they added in. So they added a crossover point. And with the crossover point, you can link the bands for high end and low end. You could set the crossover point here so you can actually swing this sort of left or right frequency through the frequency spectrum to just sort of center it wherever you want to. It starts at 440. And then you could select how much of a link between them. So they could be completely independent. They could be completely tied together, in which case you see that the crossover disappears. So if you don't want to work with the crossover, they'll give you that as an option. They have it as linked as 25% is like the default that they have it set up on. There is no multiband in the real unit. It's just full band compression. That's all it is. So this is kind of a nice twist, and it gives you some options for adjustment. So we have all of the basic settings you would find in an SSL bus compressor. Then we have a tone section to apply some saturation. So this sort of XL percentage allows us to add in the transformer to give you 2 options, a classic and a dirty. I'm not sure. I guess the classic would be the transformer that is in the SSL bus compressor. I'm not clear upon what the component structure is exactly of the SSL bus compressor. And then a dirty one here. So maybe that's just hitting it harder. And then the type here, which we have off, nickel, or iron. That'll give you different tonal characteristics, so we'll kind of go through that a little bit. Wet dry control, pretty straightforward. Input, output gain control. There's an auto gain, so if you hit play after you do your setup, hit the auto button, it will analyze the signal and then automatically select an output level, which should be closely matched to your gain reduction. There's also a headroom control. So what the headroom control will do is it will, as you increase input gain, decrease output gain by the same amount. So this is sort of like just a digital level on the in and the out. Is just kind of a quick way of calibrating sort of a reference level. So if you're coming in sort of hot or whatever, or maybe you have an alternate setting. What they say is if you load up a preset and maybe it's kind of coming in, gain reduction is a little hot, you could just pull this down. It will pull down the input level, raise the output level, and basically you can kind of rebalance everything from there. There's also a sidechain section down at the bottom here. Pretty straightforward. Got a listen button so you could hear it. High pass filter. You could set it to be external. And there's an interesting feature here, which is if you do feed it from an external bus, the sidechain compression, then what you could do here is you can mix in the original signal along with the sidechain signal, because sometimes what will happen is if you're triggering from just like a raw, dry source, you'll get it. It may kind of it may be a little bit too cold or a little too clinical or something. So you could kind of mix in the original signal as well to that sidechain to sort of balance that out. And I don't have an external sidechain setup, but that would be the basic mindset there. There's also an emphasis section. So the emphasis differs from the sidechain in that this is just a high pass filter. So we're just rolling off low end to the sidechain, the detector circuit, and that'll just kind of make it so it'll be a little bit like if it's kind of gooey or like the release is not really responsive, you're not getting the pumping and breathing that you want. Usually filtering off the low end will filter off more of the sustained signal, so it becomes more transient responsive, and the release is not getting caught up in the sustain of whatever you're feeding into it. An alternative to that is to use the emphasis control. The emphasis control operates in one of two modes: tilt, which will allow you to sort of, and this is different because what it's actually doing is it's setting an EQ curve for the input signal that feeds into the compressor and then does the opposite EQ on the output to de-emphasize it. So you're actually changing the audio frequency response going into the compression to change the way that it responds to it, and then doing the opposite EQ on the back end to sort of balance it out. So that's a little bit different, but it'll allow you to sort of tilt low or high the balance. And this can actually be a really cool way of sort of getting the compression to really be responsive and sort of pump and breathe the way that you want it. There's also a frequency here, which, this basically gives you the ability to kind of control what the crossover frequency is. I think it starts at 1 kilohertz. That can't go down to 50. I think it's like half of that, probably like 500 if this is the scale here. That's what that looks like. So we have that, and then we have what they call tub, and what this does is sort of a mid-range. So this would feed in low and high, but dip the mid. This would do the opposite, where the mid is sort of driving in and the signal, and it does the opposite on the other end, right? So that's an option you could kind of play around with. And then it is the normal stereo control here, where you can have the width control up to like 400%, whatever that means. And a mono crossover here, the mono maker. So that's sort of standard stock thing with all of the brainworx plugins. As you click here, you can eliminate those sections one at a time as you need them or don't need them, right? So visually, you can kind of start with that. We'll start with the detector section out. What I have here lined up is just some drums. And let's just kind of go through a quick setup with some drums and see what we can make happen here. Oh, sorry, set it to auto. I meant to hit this auto. All right, that's it's a little happy there on the level. Maybe I'll do it manually. All right, so now you can see here that there's an imbalance between the amount here in the lower end, right? This is set to 440, and the upper end. Now, we can kind of work with the band length to sort of just make it go full band, like a real SSL compressor. And if we wanted to kind of balance this out a little bit more, we could actually, of course, I closed the one section that I need here, which is, let's see, I could use the tilt filter here on the emphasis. Right, so you can see that this is responding more to the kick. This is responding more to the snare. It just gives you kind of like an option to sort of split things up and kind of get it to move around. Let's just compare this up against bringing them completely linked. So let me take this, paste this into here and then make that like that. I don't know. To my ear, I always like it just kind of full band. It feels like more connected. But, you know, I guess depending upon the program material, that may come in a little bit more handy, you know, depending upon how you want to do it. The thing about, you know, working with this, so you can get a good amount of gain reduction here, which we have, and kind of play with it. There's just one kind of thing to kind of make note of here. One is that, you know, when you're working with the ratio, one way to kind of think of this, because a lot of the SSL bus compressors were at 2-to-1. I always love 4-to-1 is my favorite. What you have basically is something that is a bit of a softer knee and a more aggressive knee as you go upwards. So like a 10-to-1 would make the same thing. I'll have to adjust the threshold here up. Let's see. Right, so if I copy this, let me just paste this into 1 here. So that's 10-to-1. Right, you'll get a tighter, kind of crisper sound, like a harder knee, like a sharper thing. Whereas if I go to the 4-to-1, oh, I guess I switched it before that. Let's see. Right, so you can see how it sharpens the attack. Like get that kind of harder knee, gives it a little bit of an edge, right? That's at 1 millisecond. And then if we take this and kind of go here, paste that into C and go 2-to-1, we'll have to lower the threshold a bit more. Right, so you could hear how it kind of gives you like a warmer sound, or a softer, you know, a less aggressive on the attack, a medium, and then a harder version of it just within the 3. And then if we, you know, even just within this, let's just take the sharp one here and say we want to go that based on the original drums. We can sort of work the transient a little bit here by going to a slower attack. Right, so that just takes 3 seconds or 3 milliseconds to, you know, to apply the attack to the sound. So you let the transient kind of cut through a bit more, and then, you know, we could go all the way up to 30 milliseconds, which give us, now I just have like a fast, you know, fastest release just to kind of get it to kind of pump and breathe. We could allow the transient through even more, and I'm going to have to pop this down here a little lower. Right, so you can kind of get these 2 different sounds here where you have something that allows, it actually, in a way with the slower attack, it allows the transient to come through a little bit more fully. It actually kind of rounds it out a little bit, whereas you go to the faster attack, at least down to 1 millisecond, you can get it sort of like a little like sharper and more focused and up front. So you get that kind of controller, that balance between the two. And this is sort of the art of working with the SSL bus compressor, is understanding those different attacks. I don't often use a faster attack than that, and maybe there are, you know, you can kind of get away with that a little bit with the lighter ratio. It tends to just, I don't know, to me, suck the transient a bit out too much, especially in this kind of scenario where I'm just basically compressing drums. The other option is to kind of, let's sort of go back here and use the auto release to sort of be more of like a glue. So I'll go with like 4-to-1 or 2-to-1 might be a better. Let's see. And again, if I want to sharpen the attack, I can kind of go here to 1 millisecond. Sharpen it even more by going 10-to-1. And you could see how you can really shape the sound here. So all of this, I guess I had my tilt EQ in here, but that's all right. It seems to be triggering pretty consistently and well, so we'll just sort of leave that as is. And then again, you got the side chain, which you can clean stuff up with. Adjusting the levels, here, particularly the headroom control is kind of cool. Let's actually work with the tone a little bit. So let's just stay with this. The auto release is, I believe, is a multi-stage release. It has like an initial quick recovery, and then sort of will follow the sustain signal. So rather than getting a full recovery, you can sort of, if you want to kind of, if the sound that you're looking for, and there's always a sweet spot with any compressor where you kind of get the kind of movement within it. And with the SSL bus compressor, to me, it's usually in that 3 to 4 dB range seems to be like a good sweet spot. But sometimes you can go in a bit deeper with it, and the auto release keeps it from over pumping and breathing. It at least allows you to sort of control it and kind of keep it within that area where you're kind of getting the vibe or the kind of bounce back that you're looking for from the release. Let's kind of go in and see if we can saturate this a little bit. Right, so nice little, that sounds great. Probably raises the gain up like about a good 2 or 3 dB, but let's see. That gives you like a nice low end, really helps to, push the kick, and the nickel has a little bit more of a mid-rangey kind of thing. This will give you like a dirtier, more aggressive sound. Like it just has a bit more grit in it. I'm not sure if that's good for this, just given the pace of the track. But depending upon what you feed into it, that can also be helpful. So that's actually like a nice little saturation component that you don't find. You'll get it in a good emulation of the SSL bus compressor, but it's nice to have it as a separate control. Plus, it gives you more options in terms of the way that you work with it. It's a pretty cool one. Honestly, when I first saw this, and it's like anytime you have sort of a thing that's not sort of a direct emulation of it, of something, or it has like a completely different look, feel to it, with some options, I'm always a little bit nebulous. But actually, when I called this up, loaded it up, and it was like, oh, this sounds really good, like right away. This is actually a really, really, really useful compressor. And with the extended options that you have on it, with the tone controls, the ability to kind of split the bands, the emphasis circuit, all the other stuff, it's definitely worth checking out if you don't already have it. So there you have it. Plugin of the week from brainworx, BX Glue, an SSL bus compressor emulation with some extra bells and whistles. Check it out.